My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time.
U.S. President Donald Trump liberalizes the nation's economy by levying 10% tariffs on nearly all imports. Multiple countries vow to take countermeasures against Trump's tariffs. And Donald Trump also revokes the duty-free treatment for cheap shipments from China, including Hong Kong. Good evening. You're watching Cable News. I'm Jeremy Chu. In a move that its president described as liberalizing the nation's economy, while in contrast deemed by the rest of the world as jeopardizing global trade order, the U.S. has imposed a 10% baseline reciprocal tariffs on imports from its trading partners and even higher rates for nations that run trade surpluses with the U.S. Among these, China faces the steepest hike, with a new 34% tariff bringing the total duties on Chinese goods up to 54%. Cheryl Yun has the details.
The fresh set of tariffs were introduced on what Trump called Liberation Day for the U.S. as he pledged to reorganize the global economy. Trump said the U.S. has long been ripped off in international trade, but he promised that those days are over.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen.
The 10% baseline tax was slapped across all countries, effective this Saturday. Higher rates will be imposed on 60 countries or trading blocs with substantial trade deficits with the U.S. effective next Wednesday. China was hit the hardest, with a total of 54% on Chinese exports to the U.S. after the addition of a 34% tariff to the existing 20% duties.
But again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us.
Meanwhile, the European Union will be hit by 20% tariffs. Japan will be charged 24%, and South Korea will see a 25% tariff increase. ASEAN countries like Vietnam and Cambodia face even higher tariffs. Analysts believe this is due to Chinese companies using these nations to bypass U.S. tariffs by sending products there for processing before exporting them to the U.S. Trump stressed that these rates are actually discounted, claiming they're only around half of what other nations charge the U.S. on American exports. Cheryl Yun, Cable News.
Amid the global trading order facing its most seismic shift in decades, China, the European Union, and others had pledged countermeasures to protect their economies. Quentin Yang reports on how the world reacts.
In Beijing, the Ministry of Commerce denounced the U.S. move as a unilateral and bullying act that is detached from reality and harmful to global supply chains, vowing to resolutely safeguard its rights through countermeasures. There are no winners in trade wars, the ministry warned, urging Washington to immediately cancel the tariffs and resolve disputes through dialogue. Also under harsh attack, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned the tariffs would spiral uncertainty and inflict dire consequences on millions globally. While acknowledging flaws in global trade rules, she emphasized the EU is finalizing retaliatory measures to shield its industries if negotiations fail. Canada temporarily spared new tariffs, but still subject to existing levies on steel and autos, also pledged to fight back with countermoves.
We are going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers, and we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7.
Not everyone joined the revolt, though. While calling the 10% duty unwarranted and not the act of a friend, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese ruled out retaliation to avoid inflaming consumer prices. Meanwhile, South Korea's acting president Han Duck-soo ordered emergency support for affected sectors. However, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent urged the nations to wait and see the policy's impact, warning that retaliation would only escalate the trade war. Quentin Ya, Cable News.
The U.S. leader also signed an executive order canceling a trade policy known as de minimis, which had allowed low-value packages from China and Hong Kong to enter the U.S. duty-free. The new measures will take effect on the 2nd of next month. Goods valued under $800 will now be subject to either a 30% tariff based on their declared value or a flat fee of $25 per item. Starting the 1st of June, this charge will increase to $50 per item. The U.S. Department of Commerce will assess within 90 days whether to extend these measures to include Macau. The White House said the new rules specifically target Chinese shipping firms accused of smuggling illegal drugs in small packages. The U.S. Customs reportedly processes an average of 4 million small parcels daily, and over 90% of all parcels entering the U.S. currently enjoy the de minimis exemption, with China accounting for roughly 60% of these shipments. Major direct-to-customer e-commerce platforms like Temu and Shein are the primary drivers of this trade. In Hong Kong, the government has expressed strong opposition and dissatisfaction over the U.S. decision to impose new tariffs, demanding their immediate withdrawal. Authorities vow to continue safeguarding Hong Kong's legitimate rights, including pursuing action through the World Trade Organization. A government spokesperson stressed that as a free port, Hong Kong has never imposed tariffs on imports, including American goods, and remains a separate customs territory under one country, two systems. The U.S. justification of reducing transshipment risks was dismissed as baseless and illogical, with officials calling it a blatant bullying tactic that violates WTO rules and undermines multilateral trade. The spokesperson noted the city has generated America's largest bilateral trade surplus of over $270 billion in the past decade among all U.S. trading partners. Regarding the cancellation of de minimis exemptions for mainland and Hong Kong parcels, the government criticized Washington's inconsistent policies and demanded urgent clarification from U.S. postal authorities. In other local news, the Fire Services Department announced today plans to deploy 500 personnel across high-risk areas on Thursday to prevent wildfires during Qingming Festival, as dry conditions heighten fire risks during the annual tomb sweeping tradition. With the observatory forecasting dry daytime conditions, the FSD warned of heightened fire hazards as thousands visit hillside graves and rural areas to pay respects to ancestors. Over the past decade, an average of 60 wildfires were reported annually during the festival. A task force of 88 firefighters, supported by 4 drones for real-time monitoring, will patrol hotspots. They will be joined by auxiliary teams from the Civil Aid Service, Government Flying Service, and Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department. They will be patrolling 8 high-risk areas, including Pat Heung's Chima Lane and Heung Yun Wai's Peng Yong. The department urged the public to fully extinguish burning offerings and avoid flammable materials like paper scraps. The district court today found 58-year-old transport worker Wang Chi-wing guilty of rioting and wounding with intent, overturning his earlier acquittal in a high-profile retrial linked to the 2019 Yunlong MTR station mob attack. Wang was convicted after the court re-examined video evidence and concluded that his appearance, including his facial features when unmasked, closely matched a suspect captured in footage of the July 21, 2019 attacks, where over 100 white-clad men armed with rods indiscriminately attacked commuters, journalists, and protesters returning from a rally. The judge cited striking similarities between the assailants' clothes and a pair of blue sneakers and brown shorts the police recovered from Wang's home. Surveillance footages near his residence also showed Wang wearing the same attire before and after the attack.
The retrial followed a 2024 Court of Appeal decision that overturned Wang's 2021 acquittal, criticizing the original trial judge for ignoring critical circumstantial evidence. The defendant was remanded in custody pending sentencing next Tuesday.
In another case, social worker Jackie Chen, convicted of participating in the 2019 Wan Chai riots, pleaded for leniency in court today, with her defense highlighting her decades of humanitarian services and cooperation during legal proceedings. Quentin Yang reports.
The 47-year-old, found guilty last month after a retrial, awaits sentencing next Wednesday alongside 3 co-defendants who had earlier pleaded guilty. Chen's defense team emphasized her lack of political affiliations and her dedication to social work, which spanned over 20 years. Her lawyer stressed her minimal role in her 40-minute appearance, while warning of double punishment risks, potential license revocation, and imprisonment. He urged the court to account for the case's 5-year delay in her post-acquittal compliance. In her handwritten mitigation letter, Chen expressed deep remorse for worrying her 75-year-old mother, whom she now fears will struggle alone due to poor health. The case stems from August 31, 2019, when protesters clashed with the police in Wan Chai. Prosecutors alleged Chen used a loudspeaker to urge officers to stay calm and avoid firing projectiles, while demonstrators erected barricades and threw bricks. Though initially cleared in 2020, a 2023 appellate court ordered a retrial, leading to her conviction in March 2025. The judge ruled that Chen's presence and amplified remarks emboldened rioters, creating a cumulative effect against police efforts. Quentin Yang, Cable News.
The death toll from Myanmar's 7.7 magnitude earthquake has risen to over 3,000, with more than 350 people still unaccounted for. Meanwhile, China's second batch of relief supplies has now arrived in the country.
Rescue teams in hard-hit Mandalay are using basic tools to sift through rubble in their search for survivors. Authorities warn that expected rainfall from Sunday onwards could severely complicate relief efforts, with emergency workers expressing concerns that people still trapped under debris may face drowning risks. According to Xinhua News Agency, Myanmar has experienced more than 60 aftershocks since the initial quake last Friday. China's latest shipment of emergency humanitarian aid, containing 800 tents and 2,000 blankets, has now reached Yangon.
Up until now, the SAR government has donated over 20 tons of relief supplies to support earthquake disaster efforts in Myanmar.
Writing on social media, Chief Executive Zhang Li said he met with Myanmar's Consul General in the SAR today, presenting a letter of condolence. Li added that the authorities' donation includes essential supplies comprising food and medical provisions. This follows last Saturday's deployment of Hong Kong's rescue team to Myanmar, where they jointly located a survivor with mainland's rescue squad on Wednesday.
Now let's take a look at the stock market. The Hang Seng Index ended the day down 352 points, or 1.52%, on fear of a global trade war sparking recessions and inflation. Top active stocks of the day: Alibaba was down $6.50, Xiaomi was up $1.35. SMIC was up 35 cents, and BYD was down $6.60. Foreign exchange against the Hong Kong dollar: Euro 8.63, the Australian dollar 4.94. Business conditions in the city's private sector continue to worsen in March.
The S&P Global Hong Kong Index further dropped 0.7 in March to 48.3, the lowest level seen in 9 months, while the rate of drop was also the most pronounced in 9 months. This marks the gauge's second month below the 50-mark threshold. S&P Global said both domestic and overseas demand has weakened, with new orders seeing the largest drop in 9 months, underscoring a decline in market demand. With easing capacity pressures, businesses held off on hiring, leading to a further decline in employment numbers.
Onto the weather now. It'll be mainly fine. The morning will be a bit cool with a minimum temperature of about 18 degrees. Dry during the day with a maximum temperature of around 23 degrees. And it will become cloudy later in the day. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our news tonight. I'm Jeremy Ju. Thank you for watching and good night.